The funeral home conference room smells like industrial carpet cleaner and dying lilies. I sit in the back row where they pushed me, watching my cousins Victoria and Richie whisper in the front like they own the place. Maybe they think they do. The fluorescent lights hum overhead. Victoria's jewelry jingles every time she shifts in her uncomfortable folding chair. She keeps touching her fake Hermes bag, the one she thinks nobody knows is a knockoff. Richie drums his fingers on the fake wood conference table, leaving new water rings next to the old ones. Elena Vasquez, Grandpa's estate attorney, arranges papers in a manila folder. Her expression is carefully neutral, but I catch her glancing at me. There's something in her eyes. Something that looks almost like anticipation? Before we begin the will reading, Elena says, I want to address the elephant in the room. Victoria straightens. Finally. We need to discuss Isabella's situation. My situation. Right. He hated you, Isabella. Victoria turns in her chair to face me, her voice carrying across the small room. He told us you were a vulture circling for his money. That's why we made sure you sat in the back where you belong. Silence. The air conditioning unit clicks on. Richie nods, emboldened. Your little consulting business isn't fooling anyone. We know you're broke and desperate. That's why you kept bothering a dying old man. I don't respond. No rage, no tears, just clarity. Elena clears her throat. Actually, that's not the elephant I was referring to. She opens the folder. Let's begin with the estate distribution. Finally, Aunt Francesca mutters, stubbing out her cigarette in a coffee cup. The smell mingles with her expensive perfume. Poor Dad suffered enough. Elena reads in a steady voice. To my granddaughter Victoria Castellano Pierce, who has shown her true character in my final years, I leave the sum of $1. Victoria's jewelry stops jingling. To my grandson Richard Castellano, who has demonstrated his priorities clearly, I leave the sum of $1. Richie's finger drumming stops. To my daughter Francesca Castellano Pierce, who enabled the above behavior, I leave the sum of $1. The room goes dead quiet except for that humming fluorescent light. Elena looks up from the papers. The remainder of the estate, valued at approximately $2.3 billion, goes to. She pauses, looks directly at me. Isabella Marie Castellano. I smile, just slightly. Who would like to explain to the family why that is? The silence stretches. Victoria's face has gone white. Richie's mouth hangs open. Aunt Francesca drops her coffee cup, and it shatters on the Spanish tile floor. Have you ever been underestimated so completely that people forgot you were even in the room? Have you ever watched someone destroy themselves while trying to destroy you? What happened next will show you exactly how dangerous it is to mistake kindness for weakness, and why you should never, ever bite the hand that's secretly feeding you. Let me take you back to understand how we got here. Growing up in the Castellano family meant understanding your place in the hierarchy. Victoria was the golden child, beautiful, charming, and completely dependent on family money. Richie was the heir apparent, destined to carry on the family name and business. And me? I was the ungrateful one who asked too many questions and wanted things girls weren't supposed to want. The favoritism wasn't subtle. When Victoria turned 25, Grandpa bought her a brand new Mercedes $67,000 of gleaming silver perfection. For my 25th birthday, I got a $50 gift card to Target. When Richie wanted to start his trading business, Grandpa handed him $200,000 without blinking. When I asked for a $5,000 loan to help with my MBA applications, he told me, the bank exists for a reason. Victoria's wedding was a $125,000 fairy tale. Grandpa paid for everything: the venue, the dress, the honeymoon in Tuscany. When I graduated with my MBA, summa cum laude, he sent a card. No money inside. For 4 years, the family covered Victoria's rent $4,200 a month for a luxury apartment in Scottsdale. When I was sleeping in my Honda Civic during my first startup failure, eating ramen noodles and food bank donations, they told me to figure it out like an adult. The cruelty was casual, constant. Aunt Francesca introduced me at parties as my niece who thinks she's too good for family. At Christmas dinner, Grandpa would make pointed comments about people who think money grows on trees, while Victoria modeled whatever expensive gift she'd received that day. I learned to survive on my own. Worked as an overnight security guard, morning barista, and weekend catering server simultaneously for 2 years. Sold my plasma twice weekly for 6 months to make rent. Took out $89,000 in student loans because the family refused to help, saying, "Girls don't need fancy degrees." The stress nearly killed me. Chronic migraines I couldn't afford to treat. Lost 35 pounds from malnutrition. Fainted at work twice. Worked 18-hour days until I developed stress-induced gastritis. Commuted 3.5 hours daily on public transit because I couldn't afford to live anywhere closer to work. But I survived. More than survived. I built something they couldn't understand and didn't bother to ask about. Started small consulting for healthcare companies, then buying into them, then acquiring them outright. Moved to Portland after college and never looked back. Let them assume I was struggling while I built an empire they couldn't imagine. Castellano Holdings became one of the most successful private equity firms on the West Coast. 47 companies in our portfolio. $847 million in personal net worth. $2.8 billion in assets under management. And here's the secret I kept for 5 years. I owned the senior living facility where Grandpa spent his final 2 years. The one Victoria always praised for its excellent care and beautiful facilities. I designed every care protocol. I personally approved his treatment plan. I owned the private medical practice that provided his in-home care and the pharmacy that filled his prescriptions. Every time Victoria gushed about how wonderful his care was, she was unknowingly praising my work. Every time Richie's construction company got a subcontract that kept them afloat, it came from my real estate development subsidiary. They lived in my shadow without knowing it existed. I kept the secret because they never asked. Geographic distance helped. I was in Portland, they stayed in Phoenix. I structured everything through holding companies with non-obvious names, legally changed my business registration to I. M. Castellano to avoid recognition. When I visited family, I drove my old car and kept my apartment modest. They saw what they expected to see, their failed, desperate relative. But Grandpa knew. He'd always known. While Victoria and Richie were planning their next move against me, I was already 10 steps ahead, and I was about to show them exactly what happens when you steal from the wrong person. The IRS agents arrived at my Portland office on a Tuesday morning in January, 2 weeks before Grandpa's death. I was reviewing acquisition reports when my assistant buzzed in, voice tight with worry. "Miss Castellano? There are federal agents here to see you." I found them in my reception area, 2 agents in dark suits, badges visible, looking completely out of place among my floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Mount Hood. The smell of fresh coffee from my Italian espresso machine filled the air. Keyboards clicked from the trading floor beyond, but everything felt suddenly surreal. "Isabella Castellano?" The lead agent held up a warrant. "We need to discuss your unreported inheritance income." Unreported inheritance income. From a grandfather who was still alive. They spread documents across my glass desk, forged papers, claiming I'd received $380,000 from Grandpa for failed business ventures. My signature, but not my handwriting. Tax forms I'd never seen. A reverse mortgage on Grandpa's house that I supposedly knew nothing about while abandoning him. The agent's voice was matter of fact. "You owe $847,000 in taxes and penalties on money you failed to report." I stared at the documents. My signature, but the loops were wrong, the pressure too heavy. Victoria had always been good at forgeries she'd practiced on report cards in high school. That's when the cold clarity hit. Not rage, not shock, just crystal clear understanding of exactly what my family had done and exactly what I was going to do about it. The first call I made was to Elena Vasquez. "They forged my signature," I told her, standing at my office window watching the agents drive away. "Victoria and Richie are stealing from him." Elena's voice was grim. "I was afraid of this. Isabella, there's something you need to know. I've been recording conversations." "Recording what conversations?" "Your family's. For months, the things they've said about you, about your grandfather, and about their plans. I closed my eyes. What kind of plans? The kind that involve draining his accounts before he dies. They think they're being clever. They have no idea what they've walked into. What they'd walked into was a trap I'd been building for 5 years without even knowing it. The secret weapon wasn't just my wealth. It was the infrastructure I'd built around Grandpa's life, the paper trail I'd created, and the allies I'd cultivated. Elena had been documenting everything, every cruel comment, every forged signature, every dollar they'd stolen. James Mitchell, Grandpa's private nurse, had been keeping detailed records of their visits, or rather, their lack of visits. While Victoria and Richie were telling everyone I'd abandoned Grandpa, the truth was the opposite. I'd been his most frequent visitor, flying down from Portland every 2 weeks under an assumed name. The senior living facility staff knew me as Marie Castell, a family friend who paid for upgrades to his care. I'd sat with him during his chemotherapy. I'd held his hand during the bad nights when the dementia made him confused and frightened. The family never knew because they were never there. Elena's recordings painted a devastating picture. Victoria and Richie planning which accounts to drain first, Aunt Francesca coaching them on how to forge documents. Victoria's exact words, "The old bastard won't last much longer. We need to get what we can before that vulture Isabella shows up with lawyers." They'd called me the vulture while systematically bleeding him dry. But I'd been preparing for this possibility longer than they realized. The forensic accountants I kept on retainer had been tracking unusual activity in Grandpa's accounts for months. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit had been building a case since November. Elena had been feeding them information through proper legal channels, using her position as Grandpa's attorney to document the elder abuse. The beauty of it was that every move they made dug them deeper. Every forged signature, every unauthorized withdrawal, every lie they told about my abandonment was documented. They thought they were being clever, using Grandpa's dementia diagnosis to justify their power of attorney. What they didn't know was that I'd been paying for private medical assessments that proved he was mentally competent during most of their theft. The meetings with Elena took place in a small conference room at her office, the same room where we'd eventually read the will. I'd sit in the chair where Victoria would later claim I belonged in the back, reviewing evidence that would destroy them. "They've taken $620,000 total," Elena told me during one February meeting, sliding bank statements across the table. "The forged documents claiming you borrowed money, the reverse mortgage they convinced him to sign, the systematic account draining. And the IRS investigation? They triggered it deliberately, filed false tax documents showing you received the money they stole. They're trying to frame you for their own crimes." I picked up one of the forged documents, studying Victoria's clumsy attempt at my signature. "How long have you been recording them?" "Since October. Your grandfather asked me to." "He wasn't as confused as they thought." Elena's voice softened. "He knew what they were doing, Isabella. He wanted evidence." "He knew?" "He knew everything. About their theft, about their lies, about your visits under the fake name. He knew about your business, too." I looked up sharply. "How?" Elena smiled. "He hired a private investigator 6 months ago. Found out about Castellano Holdings, about the senior living facilities, about everything you'd built. He was proud of you, and he was furious at them. The trap had been set long before I realized we were at war. Grandpa had been changing his will monthly since November, each revision more devastating to Victoria and Richie than the last. He'd been documenting their cruelty, their absence, their theft. Elena had been building a legal case that would survive any challenge they might bring. But they kept escalating. Even after the IRS investigation began, even after Elena started asking pointed questions about missing money, Victoria and Richie couldn't stop themselves. They were addicted to the easy money, convinced they were smarter than everyone else. The day Grandpa died, Victoria was at a spa in Sedona. Richie was in Vegas, losing money he'd stolen from the estate. Aunt Francesca was shopping for a new car she planned to buy with Grandpa's money. I was holding his hand in the hospital room I'd paid to upgrade, listening to him whisper his final words. "Make them pay, Isabella. Make them understand what they've lost." The funeral was their last chance to show remorse, to demonstrate some shred of human decency. Instead, they used it as an opportunity to humiliate me one final time. pushed me to the back row, made their cruel comments about Grandpa hating me, dismissed my little consulting business. They had no idea they were performing their cruelty in front of witnesses Elena had carefully positioned throughout the room. James Mitchell was there, ready to testify about their neglect. The facility director was there, ready to explain who'd really been paying for Grandpa's care. The private investigator was there, recording everything. By the time we moved to the will reading, the trap was already sprung. They just didn't know it yet. Elena had prepared for every possible response. If they accepted the will quietly, they'd still face criminal charges for the theft. If they contested it, they'd trigger the release of recordings that would destroy them publicly before the legal system finished them privately. If they tried to claim I'd manipulated Grandpa, medical records would prove his competency and their lies. There was no escape route because I'd closed them all. The $1 bequests weren't just symbolic, they were legal poison pills. By leaving them something, Grandpa had acknowledged their existence in the will, making it impossible to claim they'd been forgotten or overlooked. The tiny amounts were deliberate insults, calculated to enrage them into making mistakes. And they were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives. As Elena finished reading the will and asked who wanted to explain why I'd inherited everything, I watched Victoria's face cycle through confusion, rage, and growing panic. Richie looked like he was about to be sick. Aunt Francesca sat frozen, cigarette ash falling onto her expensive dress. They still thought this was about money they could contest or steal. They had no idea this was about justice that had been 5 years in the making. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena's assistant. FBI team in position. Warrants ready. Waiting for your signal. I smiled at my family's shocked faces and prepared to show them what happened when you underestimated the wrong person. The secret weapon wasn't just what I'd built, it was what they'd destroyed in themselves and what they were about to lose forever. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Victoria's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally rage. Her jewelry started jingling again as her hands trembled. "This is impossible," she whispered, then louder. "This is impossible." Richie found his voice first. "There's been a mistake. Grandpa he couldn't. $2.3 billion? Aunt Francesca's cigarette had burned down to her fingers. She didn't notice. "That can't be right." Elena's voice remained steady. "The estate valuation is accurate. Mr. Castellano was quite wealthy." Victoria shot to her feet, chair scraping against the tile floor. "No, absolutely not. This is fraud. She manipulated him. Sit down, Victoria." My voice cut through her hysteria like ice. For the first time in my life, she obeyed me. I stood slowly, smoothing my black dress. "Elena, I think we're done here for today. My family clearly needs time to process this information." "Wait!" Richie lurched forward. "You can't just leave. We need to discuss." "We need to discuss nothing." I picked up my purse, the same modest black bag I'd carried for 3 years. "The will is clear. Elena will handle the paperwork." Victoria's voice rose to a shriek. "You think you've won? You think this is over?" I paused at the door. "I think Grandpa made his wishes very clear." "We'll contest it." Aunt Francesca finally found her voice. "No court will uphold this. Not when they hear how you abandoned him, how I what?" I turned back to face them. "Please, continue." The room fell silent again. They were realizing, slowly, that they'd built their case on lies, and lies had a way of crumbling under scrutiny. I left them there, 3 people who'd just discovered that their victim had become their judge. But they weren't finished. Not by a long shot. The next 3 days brought an escalating campaign of threats, manipulation, and desperation that would have been almost funny if it weren't so pathetic. It started with phone calls. Victoria called 17 times the first night, leaving increasingly unhinged voicemails. "Isabella, we need to talk. This is family business, and we handle family business as a family." Then, "You can't seriously think you deserve all that money. Think about what Grandpa would really want." Then, "If you think you can steal our inheritance, you're wrong. We have lawyers too." And finally, at 3 a.m. "You selfish bitch. You killed him with stress and now you want to profit from it. We won't let you. Richie's approach was different. He tried bribery first, then threats. Look, Izzy, we can work something out. Split it 4 ways, everyone's happy. You don't need all that money anyway, right? What's one person gonna do with billions? When I didn't respond to his texts, his tone shifted. You're making a mistake. We know things about you, about your business. Don't think we won't use them. Aunt Francesca went straight for guilt and manipulation, the tools she'd perfected over decades. Your grandfather loved you, Isabella, but he loved all of us. He wouldn't want this division in the family. He'd want us to share, to take care of each other. That's what family means. I saved every voicemail, screenshotted every text. Elena had taught me well document everything. By Thursday, they'd moved beyond phone harassment to public humiliation attempts. Victoria posted on social media about gold-digging family members who prey on elderly relatives. Richie started calling my business contacts, trying to spread rumors about my financial desperation and family legal troubles. Aunt Francesca went to their church and gave a tearful performance about how I'd stolen from a dying old man and abandoned the family in their time of grief. None of it worked. My business reputation was bulletproof, built on 5 years of consistent success and satisfied clients. The social media posts made Victoria look unhinged to anyone who didn't know the context. And their church friends were more interested in gossip than justice. But they weren't done escalating. Friday morning, Elena called with a warning. They've hired a lawyer, she said. Marcus Webb from that strip mall firm on Camelback Road. He's threatening to file for emergency injunction to freeze the estate assets. On what grounds? Mental incompetence, undue influence, elder abuse. They're claiming you manipulated your grandfather and isolated him from family. I almost laughed. They're accusing me of elder abuse? It gets worse. They're demanding a family meeting. Monday at 2 p.m. They want to resolve this privately before it gets ugly in court. And if I refuse? Webb says they'll file the injunction Monday morning and hold a press conference about your financial crimes against a vulnerable senior. Now I did laugh. Elena, schedule the meeting. Conference room at your office. Isabella, are you sure? They're going to come at you with everything they have. I'm counting on it. Because while they'd been making threats and hiring cut-rate lawyers, I'd been making preparations of my own. The forensic accountants had finished their analysis of the theft. Every forged signature cataloged and compared. Every unauthorized withdrawal traced and documented. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit had completed their investigation and obtained warrants. The IRS had reversed their case against me and opened a new one against Victoria and Richie for filing false tax documents. Most importantly, Elena had finished compiling the recordings. Hours of Victoria, Richie, and Aunt Francesca revealing their true characters. Their cruelty toward me, their contempt for Grandpa, their detailed plans to steal his money. They wanted a family meeting? They were going to get one they'd never forget. Monday arrived gray and overcast, typical March weather in Phoenix. I flew down from Portland that morning, landing at Sky Harbor at noon. This time, I didn't hide my success. I took a car service instead of a rental, wore my best suit instead of modest clothes. Let them see exactly who they'd been underestimating. Elena's office building looked the same, beige, stucco, and glass, indistinguishable from a dozen others in Scottsdale. But today it felt different. Today it felt like a courtroom. I arrived at 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes early. Elena met me in the lobby, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes bright with anticipation. They're already here, she said quietly as we walked toward the elevator. All 3 of them, plus their lawyer. They've been whispering in the conference room for 20 minutes. Are our other guests in position? James is in conference room B. The FBI team is in the parking garage. The IRS agents are in the lobby cafe. Everyone's ready. The elevator climbed to the 3rd floor with mechanical precision. My heartbeat was steady, my breathing calm. I'd been preparing for this moment for 5 years without knowing it. Elena opened the conference room door, and I stepped into the same space where they'd humiliated me 6 days earlier. The same fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The same fake wood table bore the same water rings. The same uncomfortable chairs waited around the perimeter. but everything else had changed. Victoria sat at the head of the table like she owned it, wearing a black designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her jewelry was more subdued today. She was playing the grieving granddaughter role. Richie wore a suit that didn't quite fit, his nervous energy contained but visible in the way he gripped his phone. Aunt Francesca had dressed for church, conservative, respectable, the picture of wounded dignity. Their lawyer, Marcus Webb, was exactly what I'd expected. Mid-50s, cheap suit, the kind of attorney who advertised on bus benches and took cases other lawyers wouldn't touch. He stood when I entered, extending a hand I didn't take. "Miss Castellano, I'm Marcus Webb, representing the Castellano family. Thank you for agreeing to meet." I took the same chair I'd sat in during the will reading. Back straight, hands folded, expression neutral. "Let's get this over with." "Ah." Webb opened a manila folder cheaper than Elena's, with papers that looked hastily prepared. "My clients have serious concerns about the validity of their grandfather's will. We believe there are grounds for—" "Before you continue," I interrupted, "I want to make something clear. This meeting is being recorded." Victoria's jewelry jingled as she stiffened. "You can't record us without consent." Elena spoke for the first time since we'd entered. "Actually, as this is my office and my client requested recording for legal protection, I can. Arizona is a one-party consent state, and I'm consenting." Richie leaned forward. "Legal protection from what?" I smiled. "From the kind of threats and harassment you've been engaging in for the past 6 days." Webb cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "My clients are simply exercising their legal rights to contest what they believe is an invalid will." "Based on what evidence?" "Based on the fact that you isolated Mr. Castellano from his family, manipulated him during his illness, and used your business relationship to—" "Stop." My voice cut through his prepared speech. "What business relationship?" Webb consulted his notes. "Your consulting business. My clients inform me you were providing some kind of financial services to—" I started laughing. Actually laughing, the sound echoing off the conference room walls. Victoria's face flushed red. "What's so funny? You still don't know, do you?" I wiped my eyes, still chuckling. "After all this, you still have no idea who you're dealing with." "We know exactly who we're dealing with," Richie snapped. "A broke, desperate woman who manipulated our grandfather and stole our inheritance." "Broke?" I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. "Elena, would you mind pulling up the Castellano Holdings website?" Elena's laptop was already open. She turned the screen toward the table, and my company's homepage filled the display. Professional photos of gleaming office buildings, acquisition announcements, my official headshot as CEO and founder. The room went dead silent. "Castellano Holdings," I said conversationally. "Founded 2019. Current portfolio valuation, $2.8 billion. Annual revenue, $340 million. 127 employees across 3 offices." Webb's mouth hung open. Victoria had gone pale. Richie was staring at the laptop screen like it was showing him his own death warrant. "But here's the really interesting part," I continued. "The part you're going to love." I nodded to Elena, who clicked to another tab. Financial records appeared on screen: property ownership documents, corporate filings, acquisition reports. "I own the senior living facility where Grandpa spent his final 2 years. The one you always praised for its excellent care? I designed every protocol. I approved every treatment plan. I paid for every upgrade to his room." Victoria's jewelry had stopped jingling. She sat frozen, staring at the screen. "I own the private medical practice that provided his in-home care. I own the pharmacy that filled his prescriptions. Every time you gushed about how wonderful his care was, you were unknowingly praising my work." Richie found his voice, barely a whisper. That's impossible." "Is it?" "Elena, show them the visitor logs." New documents appeared on screen. Sign-in sheets from the senior living facility, visitor records, security footage, timestamps. "Marie Castell?" I said. "That's the name I used. Flew down from Portland every 2 weeks for 2 years, sat with him during chemotherapy, held his hand during the bad nights when dementia made him confused." Aunt Francesca was crying now, but not from grief. From the dawning realization of what she'd lost. While you were planning which accounts to drain next, I continued, my voice still calm, still controlled, I was reading him books. While you were forging his signature on documents, I was making sure he had the best medical care money could buy. While you were calling me a vulture, I was the only one actually taking care of him. Webb tried to salvage his case. Even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact that the will is suspicious. The timing, the amounts, the timing? I stood up slowly. Let's talk about timing. Elena clicked to another folder. Bank statements filled the screen, highlighted in red. January 15th. Unauthorized withdrawal of $45,000 from Grandpa's savings account. Victoria's signature on the withdrawal slip. But she wasn't on the account. Victoria's voice was barely audible. He gave me permission. Did he? Elena, play recording number 7. The conference room speakers crackled to life. Victoria's voice crystal clear. The old bastard's getting worse. We need to move faster before someone notices the missing money. Richie's voice responded. How much more can we take before that bitch Isabella shows up with lawyers? Victoria's voice again. She's too stupid to figure it out, and too broke to hire good lawyers anyway. I let the recording play for 30 seconds, watching their faces crumble. Webb was frantically scribbling notes, probably calculating how quickly he could withdraw from this case. Elena, play recording number 12. Aunt Francesca's voice filled the room. I don't care if it's technically illegal. He owes us this money. We've put up with his demands for years. Richie's voice. Isabella abandoned him anyway. We're the only family he has left. Victoria's voice. When he dies, we'll make sure everyone knows what a selfish bitch she is. No one will question why she got nothing. I sat back down, letting the silence stretch. Victoria was openly sobbing now. Richie looked like he might vomit. Aunt Francesca stared at the table, her carefully constructed dignity in ruins. $620,000? I said quietly. That's how much you stole. Forged signatures, unauthorized withdrawals, fraudulent power of attorney documents, a reverse mortgage he never understood. Webb tried one last desperate play. Even if some financial irregularities occurred, the arrests happened so quickly that Victoria barely had time to process what was occurring. One moment she was sobbing in the conference room chair. The next moment, FBI agents were reading her Miranda rights while snapping handcuffs around her wrists. The metal clicked with a finality that seemed to echo through the building. Richie tried to run, actually tried to sprint past the federal agents toward the elevator, his ill-fitting suit jacket flapping behind him like broken wings. They tackled him in the hallway outside Elena's office, his face pressed against the same beige carpet where he'd walked so confidently an hour earlier. His phone skittered across the floor, screen cracking against the wall. Aunt Francesca simply sat frozen as they cuffed her, tears streaming down her face, whispering, I'm sorry, over and over, to no one in particular. Her carefully applied makeup ran in black streaks down her cheeks. Marcus Webb, their strip mall lawyer, abandoned them so fast he left his briefcase behind. I watched through the conference room window as he practically sprinted to his car, probably already composing his withdrawal letter in his head. The trials took 8 months. I didn't attend. Elena represented my interests while I focused on running my business and rebuilding my life. But I followed every development through court documents and news reports. Victoria received 42 months in federal prison for elder abuse and fraud. With the 85% rule, she'd serve a minimum of 35 months behind bars. Her husband filed for divorce before her sentencing, citing irreconcilable differences and financial fraud. The country club revoked her membership. The charity boards she'd served on quietly removed her name from their websites. The IRS seized $890,000 in assets: her house, her car, her jewelry, everything she'd built her identity around. She moved from her $6,800 a month house to her mother's basement. Last I heard, she was working the night shift at a grocery store for $14 an hour, trying to pay restitution on money she'd already spent. Richie got 27 months for conspiracy and fraud minimum. 23 months served. FINRA banned him from securities trading for life. His BMW and boat were repossessed within weeks of his arrest. He declared bankruptcy, but the criminal restitution survived the filing. He moved to a $980 studio apartment and started driving for Uber, trying to earn money with the same hands that had forged our grandfather's signature. Aunt Francesca received 18 months suspended sentence with 3 years probation and ankle monitoring. She had to sell her house to pay legal fees and was ordered to pay $125,000 in restitution. The extended family, once they learned she'd enabled the theft, cut her off completely. She moved to a senior housing facility, ironically, one owned by my company, though she never knew it. They all tried to contact me after their sentencing. Dozens of calls from blocked numbers that I never answered. Voicemails I deleted without listening. Letters I returned unopened. Victoria even tried reaching out through social media, creating fake accounts to send messages about family forgiveness and second chances. I blocked every attempt, changed my phone number, had my assistant screen all communications. There was nothing left to say to people who had shown me exactly who they were. The money from grandfather's estate allowed me to expand Castellano Holdings beyond anything I'd imagined. I donated $50 million to elder abuse prevention programs across the country. Established the James Mitchell Foundation, named after grandfather's nurse, to provide better training for senior care workers. Funded 3 new assisted living facilities designed around dignity and respect rather than profit margins. My business grew to manage over $4 billion in assets. We acquired 63 companies in 2024 alone, creating thousands of jobs and improving healthcare access across the Pacific Northwest. I moved to a penthouse overlooking the Columbia River, with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in light I'd never had in those cramped apartments where I'd eaten ramen and sold plasma to survive. The Portland Business Journal named me CEO of the Year. Forbes included me in their list of most influential women in finance. Harvard Business School invited me to speak about building wealth through ethical investing. None of these accolades mentioned my family, and I preferred it that way. I never married, never had children. Some people assumed it was because I was too focused on business, too driven to make room for personal relationships. The truth was simpler. I'd learned early that the people who claim to love you can hurt you the most. I had friends, colleagues, employees who respected me. That felt like enough. Elena and I remained close. She'd moved to a larger firm and specialized in elder law, using the recordings from my case to help other families navigate financial abuse. James Mitchell retired from nursing and started consulting for senior care facilities, teaching other caregivers how to recognize and report abuse. They were the only people from that chapter of my life who stayed in my world. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if Victoria and Richie had simply been kind. If they'd visited grandfather regularly, treated him with respect, acknowledged my success instead of trying to destroy it. The inheritance would have been different, not the symbolic $1 bills, but a genuine division among people he loved. But they'd made their choices long before that conference room confrontation. Every cruel comment, every forged signature, every moment they chose greed over family had led them exactly where they ended up. I keep grandfather's 1,952 Rolex Submariner on my desk now, next to photos of the senior living facilities that bear his name. Sometimes I wind it and listen to its steady tick, remembering the man who saw through their lies and chose justice over sentiment. The watch still keeps perfect time. Now, 5 years later, I sit in my office overlooking Mount Hood, watching the morning light reflect off the snow-covered peak. My assistant brings me coffee in a cup that costs more than Victoria makes in a day. The irony isn't lost on me. I built this empire because I had to survive. I survived because they taught me I couldn't depend on anyone else. They created their own enemy and never realized it until the trap had already closed. Here's what I want you to understand. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. It's about who holds your hand when you're scared, who celebrates your victories without jealousy, who sees your worth even when you can't see it yourself. The people who raised me taught me that I was worthless, that my dreams were too big, that girls like me should be grateful for scraps. They were wrong about everything except one thing. I was dangerous, just not in the way they thought. I was dangerous because I refused to believe their lies about my worth. I was dangerous because I turned their cruelty into fuel instead of letting it destroy me. I was dangerous because when they finally pushed too far, I had the resources and the evidence to push back. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. They see someone who doesn't fight back immediately and assume they've won. They don't realize that some people are playing a longer game, building something bigger, waiting for the right moment to reveal exactly who they've been underestimating. Victoria, Richie, and Aunt Francesca learned the difference too late. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you're the family scapegoat, the one they dismiss, the one they underestimate, know this: their opinion of you doesn't define your worth. Their limitations don't limit your possibilities. Their cruelty says everything about them and nothing about you. Build something they can't tear down. Become someone they can't diminish. And when they finally realize what they've lost, don't look back. Some bridges are meant to be burned. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming so successful, so fulfilled, so genuinely happy that their opinion becomes irrelevant. It's building a life so beautiful that their absence improves it. I am living proof that the girl they called worthless can become the woman they'll never be able to touch. And that's a lesson worth sharing. What's your story? Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have supported you? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay down.